What's up, guys? Hope everyone is doing well. So, Warren Buffett has sold about 55% of his Apple stock. The Japanese yen caused quite a massive sell-off in the stock markets over there, and even within the US, and even here, as we can see for Bitcoin. A lot of stuff happened over the weekend. But if we look here at the 6-hour chart, which I've been going over and updating for quite some time, we can see that the sell-off, which so far within this sideways range that we can see here, slightly to the downside from the recent local high to the bottom was about 30%. So far this entire drop has been somewhere around 34%. Worst retracement and pullbacks we've seen so far since Bitcoin has started to move up since the end of 2022. What I do find interesting is that the price highly correlated with what was going on socioeconomically overseas, then affecting America as well due to the borrowing of Japanese yen, and then that going into certain assets that are related and more relative to America as a country. All of this led Bitcoin not only to the largest jump so far as we can see here, but also the most rapid one, at least within the sideways range that we've seen. And it all culminated right down at the bottom. No candles closed below on the 6-hour. There were some wicks below, but so far there's a bounce that we can see here. If we look down here at the RSI, I was pointing out how there you could see these downtrends back here this prior time, early May. This was correlated to Bitcoin, seeing another small uptrend within this channel. Same thing happened here. So far, the RSI has gone back below, which did happen last time around back here, more towards around mid of May. So we could be seeing something similar. This drop has been far more drastic, and it's clearly a lot different than this kind of this mid uptrend we see right here, halfway through this descending channel. But as of for now, Bitcoin seems to be finding support. Obviously, best case scenario is going to continue to go upward. So far, it's about a 17% move up since wicking down to around 49,000. But I also do believe, perhaps all the news associated with the Japanese yen, maybe Warren Buffett or a bunch of other big name people that have a lot of money, they're going to sell some stocks. And just in general, there's so much going on in the world right now that could happen that happens to correlate with price. It may even actually be the single factor, the main factor that brings Bitcoin even lower. The last thing that I want to point out on this chart, though, to go back to around 15, 16,000 here towards the end of November of 2022, from this area right here all the way up to this area, as their retracement shows, this would be the first uptrend in the overall bull market we'd be seeing here for Bitcoin, or just whatever moves it makes from its bear market low to a new bull market all-time high. And we can see that this sideways range right here, multiple months long, back during around leading into early 2023, really the almost the entirety of 23, Bitcoin went sideways, except for a few months. Though if you see looking here at these two lows at the sideways range sets, you can see that it came down by some degree below around halfway between this 786 right here and this 618, roughly about a third, well, 2/3 downwards. And if we do the same thing with this second uptrend right here, they can see with this retracement. So from here all the way up to here, you can see that with this most recent move towards the downside, the Bitcoin has actually met this range, this criteria more so. As I said, down towards kind of like the third of the space between the 786 and the 618. So perhaps this is a technical reason that can lead towards Bitcoin finding this overall bottom, a local bottom, and then going up into one final leg for the current bull market, which is what I believe is to what the future has to hold. Obviously, I can be wrong, but I by no means think at this point that the bear market is beginning and the bull market is over. Before I get to the next chart, I just want to go over the Bitcoin Fear and Greed this chart one more time. Now, right now the Fear and Greed sits at about 29, but earlier today, August 6th, it was sitting at 17, which again, I just want to reiterate something that I went over a few videos ago, actually back when Bitcoin was right here for the first time at around 54, 53, as it roughly got revisited again here recently, sitting at around 26 on the Fear and Greed. These values for the Fear and Greed are what correlate to every single low, going all the way back to 2019, going back to the March crash of 2020, going back to the most recent bear market low at around 15, 16,000 in end of 2022. We see about basically 30 approximately and lower. This correlates to every single time for bear market lows, and especially even lower down to even like the 10s, below 10. But we're seeing this at Bitcoin being at all-time highs and trading sideways at all-time highs, having already set new all-time highs, and then continuing to what I believe is showing constructive trading along these all-time highs. If we look here at this 2-day chart, let's get rid of all of these. So we look here at this range again. We have this sideways range almost the entirety of 2023, and then we see this ranging right here, which is basically sideways but with a slight downwards orientation. It's basically a descending channel. It's broadening, almost kind of like an inverse or a different type of not bullphone, but megaphone pattern. But as I went over in some of the last videos, how overall this being the first uptrend, then this the second uptrend, we see these sideways or just some sort of consolidation periods, and I think ultimately Bitcoin will find some sort of low here soon. Within the next month to two or so, I think it'll be found. Whether or not it goes a little bit lower, or if it even comes down to around 43, 42, even seeing some wicks down to around approximately 40,000, as I've been saying this for many, many months, which is one of the reasons why I don't think there's, despite the whole Japanese yen situation and the stock market's seeing historic daily pullbacks that it hasn't seen in decades. That goes for both the American stock market and the Japanese stock market. Also, obviously, Warren Buffett selling almost a little over half his Apple stock. I mean, despite all of that, Bitcoin's only down approximately 20%, which is normal within bear markets, going down to around, as I said, right here, roughly around where price was going sideways around December 2023, January 2024, around 43, 40,000 or so. As I've been saying for quite some time, this is really the bottom of the barrel. This is an approximately 40 up to around 43% drawdown towards the downside. Bitcoin historically sees 20 to 40% drawdowns once the bull market is completely confirmed. Outside of one exception would be obviously to go down to the prior 2019 to March of 2020. I mean, this entire drawdown was 72%, but those of you familiar with the content that I post with my phase cycle theory, and this being this basically, look here, this is just a macro W, double bottom, which then led to a double top, which has then led into this bear market right here, which would set a type of double bottom as I've gone over in the past, and then this overall is the uptrend towards somewhere around 200, well, 150, 250,000 approximately. So overall, according to this system and the phase cycle theory, going back and looking at it in the past as I have, the bottom really wasn't set. The bull market didn't really begin until the March crash was made. So this is why I don't really often speak of, as I said, Bitcoin might still see another 72% drawdown, because this is not what really makes sense underneath the lens that I look at Bitcoin. I mean, obviously it's totally possible. I mean, I've seen plenty of people mentioning people that are popular within crypto analysis content, whether it's on Twitter or YouTube, saying that they see similarities between that, and if we do see like a 72% drop, that would take Bitcoin back down to 72, sitting around basically approximately 20,000. I mean, obviously that could totally happen, especially with where the state of the world is at, everything going on with Israel and Iran, the Ukraine and Russia situation, which seems to have died down at this point, but there's still obviously tensions. I mean, just in general, the amount of global turmoil that's been um, happening for, I mean, really the last 5 years, to be specific, which would actually go back to one of the main reasons for this March crash, leading into the everything that happened during 2020 with the pandemic. But lastly, for this chart is Bitcoin finally wigged down to the 200 estimated moving average, which sits right now at around 51.3K. The 800 EMA sits around 34,000. That is important to note because I mean that, although I don't think that's likely, that could also be something level of importance for Bitcoin to continue to come down to. But if that does happen, then I'm going to be rethinking everything, and a lot of people will also be rethinking a lot when it comes to Bitcoin. If you look here at this 4-day chart, I was going over this RSI, I've been updating it. I mentioned how there was the RSI was outside, it was below the Bollinger Band. We saw this turquoise dot printed, which most cases going back multiple years, when you see this RSI get out of the Bollinger Bands and it prints a turquoise dot, this is typically lined up with the local low, some sort of local low before a pretty big, pretty sizable uptrend, which could still be the case. I mean, if we look here at the 4-day candles, the current candle is still only, it's a little bit below, but it's basically at the candle close low back July, 4-day period around July 7th. Especially if, going back to this 6-hour chart here, I mean, if Bitcoin is actually finding a bottom here within this descending channel, and let's say that this crash was just, it was just a minor drawdown. It's nothing large when especially when it comes to crypto, but due to what's been happening within the last 4 days, Bitcoin could see a quick recovery, and this what a lot of people want to call it maybe a drawdown to panic over, really is going to amount to nothing. But I could also definitely see it going lower as well. But going back to the 4-day chart, also the 0.5 of this Fibonacci, the tracement for the overall cycle, specifically the phase 1 within cycle 3 that Bitcoin's at. Bitcoin finally went down to the 0.5, which sits at approximately 50,000. Look here at the weekly chart, the 50 EMA band encompasses a range of around 48.5 to around 57.2 at this point. Going back in history, as you can see, after we had the March crash, as I elaborated somewhat on earlier, Bitcoin never went back below or really went substantially into the 50 EMA band until the bull market was dying off. You can see the same thing back here as well for the 2015 to 2017 bull market, also similar back here as well. Going back to this phase 1 here in cycle 2 for Bitcoin. Now with moving averages and with the decay of Bitcoin over time, this is obviously, we could go back in history and say, oh, this moving average never been broken, but as Bitcoin decays and it matures, it will more likely than not eventually break that. I mean, one testament to that being, if we look at the 200 EMA right here, you can see that Bitcoin is going lower below it. I mean, these first two instances right here for these first two bear market lows are roughly the same, but as you can see, Bitcoin's deviating a little bit lower than 200 EMA each time, looking at this instance. But again, just want to reiterate how, I mean, at this point, if Bitcoin goes below, seems to be substantially going below 40,000, I personally will be completely all out of ideas. If we look at this monthly chart, the RSI is getting very close to this uptrend. As you can see, if we go all the way back to 2011, we see this uptrend for the bull market where the RSI never went below. Same thing for 15 to 17, 2019 to 2020. If this ends up being substantially broken and Bitcoin goes below around basically 40 to 43,000 at this point, then Bitcoin might actually be in a bear market. Perhaps Bitcoin's dying. Maybe Bitcoin's not what a lot of people think it is, and it's not some sort of economic powerhouse that's going to completely revamp and revolutionize various and broad sectors of human day-to-day life within society and peer-to-peer interactions. Lastly, here's the SPX. Now, Again, those of you familiar who's been keeping up with my content, I've been leaning towards a bearish bias for the stock market within America, which I still stick to here at this point. Now, this price target's been met towards the upside more clearly, which happens to be coinciding with all the turmoil and the chaos that happened over the last 4 or 5 days. Stock market seeing crashes that are historic. There's also a bearish divergence candle being printed here as well, which lines up with very long-term bearish divergence on here that I've been pointing out for years. Not for years, but on the chart for years we've been seeing the bearish divergence. Now, I do want to point out how you can see, looking back from 1987 to 1989, if we look here at the RSI, we see this downwards resistance for the RSI, whereas if we go and look at the price, the correlative area for the price is going to be upwards. So that was a bearish divergence that we were seeing right there at the second pink dot in this uptrend. If we fast forward to more present modern times, where we see this uptrend that I've gone over in the past, these two pink dots, and we see here this bearish divergence, more micro, shorter term bearish divergence. You can see there's one right here, but there's also one going back to 1998 as well. Where we're seeing this positive resistance in price, negative resistance in the RSI, like we were seeing all the way back here from 87 to around 89.90 after the second pink dot in the uptrend. Again, second pink dot in the uptrend. So ultimately, which I've clearly stated this in the past, and I've been saying that the SPX could continue and go far higher than I have been showing my bias to be, which would be the bearish outcome. Now that this price target is met, I think, and also the bearish divergence candle that could strengthen the bearish downside, but also just in general what's going on in the world. And if Bitcoin is supposed to be this, like I said, economic superpower, and it's Bitcoin and blockchain, cryptographic currencies and solutions are going to replace the traditional fiat and stock market and how the stock market has worked. For example, let's say some sort of company, as I mentioned in the past, wants to just, instead of putting their company on like the NASDAQ or the SPX or some sort of fiat stock market indice, they'll just transition it into a token that runs on a blockchain, and it will survive there as the old traditional things, such as what we're looking at here, the NASDAQ, SPX, all these indices, and the fiat stock market ultimately just dies off. That's the main reason why I've been painting the picture here for not only the SPX but the broader American stock market, is because of that very reason, because that's personally where my bias and where my opinions and beliefs lean towards. But at the end of the day, it could totally be wrong, and this chart here could continue to go rather high. I mean, even as high as around 16,000, which would be this projection if we see a similar uptrend, because we're seeing something similar to it as well, as I pointed out with the bearish divergence that was seen from 87 to 90, and we're seeing something very similar as well. But I think we're also seeing something very similar in a bearish scenario as well. But that was all that I wanted to go over in this video. So as always, hopefully enjoyed. None of this is meant to be financial advice, but all that being said and everything gone over, I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Ooh, I'm regretting now.